Yeah, yeah, yeah. Baby, yeah. You know, say ready for this. You know I have patience.
Okay, all right. So,
all right. Yes, indeed, family. Greetings. This is Kyle Dixon here, and Coyote Bentley here for another Grand Rising Collective podcast. So again, typically we have guests on our podcast. We tend to have guests from the community, whether it be communities here in New York or whether it be abroad across the nation. But today we decided to have just a one-on-one with you all, just myself and my co-host today for y'all. So in reference of Grand Rise Collective, if this is your first time viewing us, welcome. And we are a podcast that is about excellence, about being your best. And the term Grand Rising comes from an endearing term in the morning, like when people say good morning, some people say Grand Rising, good rising. And it's a reminder to start the day at your best with excellent intentions, excellence in reference of your actions, and also in a personal mantra to say that you want to rise to the occasion of challenges and obstacles that you have in your life. And there's a lot of challenges and obstacles going on currently in America right now. And we're definitely going to talk about those, family, today on this session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my co-host, and Coyote, take it away, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you as always. My name is Coyote Bentley. Those who are, our subscribers, thank you for continuing to support us and engage with us. And those of you who are new, you're going to get to know me. And part of that is my introduction right now in regards to who I am. Again, my name is Coyote Bentley. And I think it's important that you know who's speaking to you as well as who you're listening to. So with that said, I'm president of an organization called 4Ts, which stands for Teaching Teens to Think. The mission is to help inner city youth identify their inherent skill set, meaning what they do naturally, so that way they can use it to excel in education, as well as higher education, that being college, in order to get a job, establish a career, and ultimately start a business if they choose to. These programs and services that I offer is for a demographic between the ages of 16 and 24. That's my hat as far as the entrepreneur. I'm also a professor at Fordham University, and I also sit on the advisory board of LIU. The reason why I say that and explain that is because I also like to combine that with why I'm a part of the Grand Rising Collective with my brother and colleague Kyle Dixon. It's in order to disseminate the information that I'm able to share with these young people to our community at large, to take our conversations out of a bubble and bring it to all of us, be it parents, community leaders, community organizers, those in the community, share that wealth of information so that way they can use it to build the community up and make more for a leverage economic platform. So that's the long and short of it. I'm honored to be a part here of the Grand Rising Collective. We have a lot of things that we want to talk about. And as Kyle stated, we don't have any guests because I think us as co-hosts really want to get into these topics, which are to some degree very sensitive. Yes. And, for certain viewers, an advisory warning. Some of the content may be not suitable for certain viewers. Because of its intensity. So I think that's important to say, but that's my introduction. Thank you so very much, Kyle. And if I forgot anything, I'm sorry. Hit us in text, send us a message or what have you. We're going to give you our handles, and let us know what else we probably did not cover, what I may not have covered. But thank you, Kyle. All yours.
Indeed. No, it's definitely, if we forgot a family, blame it on the mind and not the heart, So seriously. And again, we probably cover it as we talk with this episode today. So we have a lot going on in America, unless you've been under a rock somewhere or away from social media or doing some sabbatical or doing some retreat out in the wilderness with no TV, no social media. We've had a tragedy up in the Midwest and Minneapolis, Minnesota, with a brother named George Floyd. And you know, it's just a tragedy. And we've had many tragedies this month alone with the brother Ahmaud Arbery and the sister Breonna Thomas in Louisville. And, you know, family, it really disheartens me, and it really hurts to see people who are just trying to live their lives really be accosted, be violently murdered, killed, assaulted by just being who they are, and namely who they are, people, what they call the PC term is people of color. Let's just say Black folk. Okay, let's just say African people, African Americans, right? And you know, we're going to talk about that today because it needs to be talked about. It needs to be talked about every day, just not on our platform, but every day. And Kaidi, I know you had some stuff that you definitely want to share with the family. We definitely have some stats. We have some information outside of it. So we're not just going to be talking heads today. We're going to give you some actual tangible things to go back and think about, research, discuss, talk amongst your peers, because it definitely needs to be thoroughly talked about and acted upon, so that way these things keep happening much less, if not at all. Okay, so
all right. So
yeah.
what I'm about to share, Cal, and we'll have more discussions on this, is a video of the riots that are taking place throughout the United States with relation to George Floyd's murder. So these are the riots aspect. I'm not sure if the video is going to show the actual officer in his actions to George Floyd. It's going to give you some sense of the outrage that exists today as a result of that officer's action on an innocent civilian who wasn't carrying any weapons and who was detained and could not therefore defend himself. So without any further ado, I'm going to play the video, and then after the video, or some maybe in between the video, we're going to discuss some of the things that's going on. That may be the case, but definitely after the video, we're going to launch into a longer discussion, as well as provide some tangibles and action steps.
All right. So again, family, before he plays the video, again, parental discretion advised. What you might see here, you may not want to see. And I don't necessarily want to see it either. So I'm going to excuse myself.
But Kyle, this isn't the Ahmed one.
Okay.
This is just the riots taking place with relation to George Floyd. We're
okay.
Do that first, okay?
Okay, cool.
For calm tonight after a former police officer was charged with murder and manslaughter in the death of George Floyd, as firefighters cooled the flames from another night of unrest and destruction. The county attorney announced that there was enough evidence to prove Derek Chauvin's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. On Monday, the now fired officer pinned Floyd's neck to the ground for several minutes as he pleaded he couldn't breathe. Our Gabe Gutierrez is in Minneapolis tonight. Gabe, what's the mood on the ground right now?
Lester, calm so far. The mayor here has just imposed a nighttime curfew this weekend. There's also a bigger police presence. What is unclear is whether that might ramp up tensions after an arrest that many protesters here have been waiting for. Tonight, after days of anger, pain, and protests, an arrest connected to the death of George Floyd, fired Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin is now charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter.
I'm not insensitive to what's happened in the streets. My job is to do it only when we have sufficient evidence. We have it today.
State charging documents allege that Chauvin had his knee on Floyd's neck for 2 minutes and 53 seconds after Floyd became non-responsive, according to body camera video. In all, the complaint says Chauvin had his knee on Floyd's neck for more than 8 minutes. No response yet from Chauvin's attorney. The third night of protests had been the most violent by far. For hours, anarchy, rioters breached and burned this evacuated police precinct. Other buildings crumbled. Local police and firefighters retreated.
It's a scene of utter chaos. Right now, this fire is raging out of control, and smoke is billowing into the air, can be seen for miles.
At daybreak, the destruction devastated this South Minneapolis community.
I'm a grown man standing here, teared up.
Anger over one man's death had turned into much more, an explosion of fury over years of mistreatment.
This city knew it was coming. They knew it was coming.
Lynette Weisner has lived here all her life.
This right here, the war's here. Do something about it.
And this is
Clean up this police department.
Today, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz promised to restore order and directly criticized local leaders for an inadequate response.
And the reason we're standing here today is if this would have been executed correctly, the state would not lead on this. That did not happen.
The mayor has not yet responded. The governor also apologized to CNN after the state patrol arrested 3 of its journalists on live television, even as looters and vandals were allowed to run free.
I am deeply apologetic that this happened. It is wrong. It is unacceptable. And we needed to correct it.
I just hope we can recover from this.
Today's arrest was the news longtime resident Kirsten Olson had been waiting for.
I am ecstatically happy.
James Lawson is more skeptical.
I felt like there was a little bit of sign of relief, but like I said, what about the other 3?
The county attorney says an investigation is underway into the other 3 fired officers, and he anticipates charges. New video from a different angle shows 2 of the officers, not seen before, side by side on the ground next to Officer Chauvin during the incident. Late today, the attorney for Floyd's family responded to the arrest.
They're a little relieved today that the officer was finally arrested. However, they wanted the charges to be first-degree murder.
For a 4th night, this city is on edge, wondering if one officer's arrest is enough to diffuse the tension or whether the anger runs too deep. Dave Gutierrez, NBC News, Minneapolis.
I'm Blaine Alexander. Miles from Minneapolis, anger, frustration pouring into the streets of America.
That could be my father. That could be my brother. That could be me.
From Atlanta to Boston, Houston, to Memphis. Demonstrations turned violent in Denver when a car plowed through protesters. No one was seriously injured.
As a young Black woman, I'm used to not being violent. This one, it hits different.
For many, the death of George Floyd only piling on to the mounting anger over the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. The 26-year-old shot at least 8 times last March by police officers who stormed into her home, serving a narcotic search warrant as she and her boyfriend slept. Overnight, in her hometown of Louisville, gunshots ripped through this crowd of protesters, injuring 7.
These shots came from within the crowd, not from police officers.
The peaceful protests erupting into violence on the same day the world heard this frantic 911 call from Taylor's boyfriend.
How do you know what happened? Somebody kicked in the door and shot my girlfriend.
Police say the officers knocked and identified themselves. Taylor's family says they didn't either.
Is she alert never talked to you? No, she's not. Breathe. Okay, you said you're in apartment number 4. Hell, oh my God.
Kenneth Walker, who says he thought the officers were intruders, fired a shot that injured 1 officer. The officers have not been charged, and Taylor's family says no drugs were ever found in the house. The police union has not returned requests for comment. Taylor's family thanking protesters, but begging for peace.
Please go home, be safe, and be ready to keep fighting.
No matter what's done, no matter how many protests, it keeps happening.
I can't breathe!
Gathering in the midst of a pandemic, protesters say they are now forced to fight a different virus, racism. Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Atlanta.
And also late today, protesters in San Jose, California made their way onto Highway 101, bringing the highway to a standstill. Traffic backed up, unable to move, a major situation that was developing there. And there are also protests growing in New York City. NBC's Ron Allen is there. Ron, what's the scheme?
Lester, a second day of protest, a We Can't Breathe rally here in New York, support for George Floyd out in Minneapolis, but also an echo of the Eric Garner case here. It's been 6 years since that incident hands of NYPD police. 6 years later, no one charged with any criminal offense. Breathe. Hands up, don't shoot. We've seen arrests here. There were 70 arrests last night in protests. A lot of energy, a lot of intensity, years of grievance here being vented on the streets of New York.
All right, Ron Allen in New York, thank you. We've been on the air now for just over 8 minutes.
Let's pause it right here.
The same length of time prosecutors say that officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck.
All right. So I'm moving from the stream. So, family, thank you for sharing that, by the way. Kadi set that up, family. This is all the news. That's just a piece of it because it's running continuously, nonstop. But you also have to be sure to take a break from that because it can wear on your psyche. It can wear on your emotional state, mental state. And also you need to be able to go back and assess what you're taking in, the language they're using, the images they're presenting, because it can be a detriment. Not to say that it is, but it could be an asset, but it could be a detriment depending on how you engage. I like the fact that the footage had the different cities, how they are responding to the violence of taking someone's life without just cause, with the brother George Floyd, with Ahmaud Arbery, and the sister I'm sorry, family, earlier, for Breonna Taylor, who lost their life when they shouldn't have. All right, there was no just cause for that through law enforcement, and it's a tragedy. It's been a tragedy. It is a tragedy, and it always will be a tragedy. And I'm saying things that, of course, people know and feel in their hearts. Those who do have heart for humanity and people in general, because unfortunately, family, there are some people out there when it comes to Black people, African people, that they do not see us in the same vein as other human beings. They see us as things. They see us as the quote unquote boogeyman or boogie woman, that any progression or any sense of livelihood is a threat to their being and their livelihood. And that's not the case. And it's just really, really sad that it takes this, as it's done countless other times, to get many people's attention. And that's just unfortunate. It really is. I don't know. You want to add anything that Kaide? I could go on and on and on, but
I know we'll balance it out. Thank you for saying that because it put a smile on my face. It got me out of the train of thought that I was in because it ties into how I felt this week, and you just reiterating what you saw in the news kind of welled me up inside. My mom always taught me, Jesus Christ and him crucified, Heru. Now that I'm learning variation name, the spiritual realm, is that all these things that are happening, are being allowed to happen from the higher being for a purpose. But with that said, let me say with that said, it still pains my heart to witness this in this day and age. One of the things that I want to pick out that I still struggle with processing is in the beginning of the clip, and it frustrates me, man. How people are going to come away from that officer putting his knee on George Floyd's neck with the intent to harm him, to, in essence, try and kill him. If you look at that clip, that brief clip for that second, you can see the intent that he had in his face and the way he was maneuvering his knee on his neck to suffocate him. and doing it with impunity, and how people can come away from that image and not get that, and not see that, and not realize that. But how funny it is that if the roles were reversed, and if it was a black man taking the same exact action on a white man in that position, they would see the same lens that we see coming from a black perspective. That's what frustrates me to no end. And I can't say it enough. I can't repeat that example or that description enough. So with that said, the other thing added to this is the protests. And one of the things that was said by the protests, I completely agree with. We were doing protests in the 60s.
Should before that.
Before that, there was that Time magazine cover that shows protests of a black man running. The date of it was 1965 or 68.
Yeah.
Somewhere within there.
Right.
And then the Time cover crosses out 1965 and 68 and puts 2020 with the similar image of what we're going through.
Right.
So then you have to ask yourself, what do we really, truly, honestly expect from doing the same thing that we did back in 1965 and 68? There's this famous, I'll leave it up to you to give feedback on that, Cal, but there's this famous saying that says, that gives the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The definition of insanity. So the question then leads to, are we as a populace, black and white, operating in insanity, thinking that protest is going to change something that it didn't change over 20 years ago in 1965 and 1968? And one final thing that just brought to my mind, no disrespect to any other culture, respect to Jews, whites, or what have you, who are standing up in protest with signs and stuff like that. Okay, fine. Thank you for doing something. Thank you. But question, when atrocities are done to your culture, do you stand up with picket signs? Or do you get the war and start coming after the powers that be, like those who are standing on the Capitol in certain states with AK-47s on their hip? Is that the action you take when your family, when this directs your culture and your family? Do you stand in front of the picket signs with signs up? Or do you carry a weapon and you make it known to the government what's going on? If this will not be accepted and we're not turning the other cheek, we're going to make sure to stop if we have to die for it. Are you taking the same action when it applies to your culture? That's the question. Those are the two questions I want to bring up and pose and bring into this conversation.
Man, whew. I mean to live in a society is to be partially insane anyway. I mean, like we all have the stench of racism, white supremacy all on us because society in America functions as such. I mean, I've seen countless, and I appreciate like my friends and my colleagues. You know, I've been posting a lot of like jewels as far as quotes and book references, and it's really been empowering because we're empowering each other through words and through our awareness. You know, when people say about spirituality, you know, versus religion in some forms, spirituality is an awakening. It's an awareness. You know, it's not just like, oh, everybody be peace. It's an awareness, and people are aware. People are aware right now. And when you talk about going back to your initial question with the insanity, again, we all live in insanity because we live in a system of white supremacy, and that in itself is defunct. It's dysfunctional because it's based on the ideology that if it's white, it's right. Like, doesn't matter if it is or if it isn't, as long as it benefits them, it's right. And when I mean by white, like Caucasian, right? European descent. So that question, you got to go back to the structure of how society is, how it is made up. And then on top of that, when we talk about the protesters, the protesting this time is very different. If you've noticed on the news, you see a lot of folks who are not black that are out there protesting on the front lines, setting fire to buildings, throwing things, right? And it's not to say that black folks are not in those crowds, but a lot of major protesters seem like they're Caucasian. Buildings, throwing, right? So in reference of how we see it, some of them are protesters. Some of the Caucasians that are protesting are legitimate. They heed to the cause of humanity because they see that something is humanly not right, right? Their souls are not at rest. But then you have people out there who are provocateurs, as we've seen, that are breaking the windows, setting certain fires. And when I say this, family, I say this with due respect, that a lot of the protests that black folks have gotten into in the past, I'll say, 50 years, have we set fire to buildings? Sure, yes, we've done that, for sure. But when you set fire to certain places, that's typically not the typical actions of people in certain communities. Like setting fire to post offices, that's not typically something that a black person would tend to go for, right? Because why we set fire to a post office? What's the point in that? You know, they set fire to the precinct in Minneapolis. I was shocked at that. You know, I don't know who did the fire. I can't say because I'm not there. But I have friends who live in Minneapolis, and a lot of them are hurt. A lot of them, as they should be, because you got to think, Philando Castile got murdered on camera, just as the brother George Floyd got murdered on camera, right? Shot. I didn't watch that video, nor did I watch the George Floyd, which I'll go into later. But you have provocateurs, anarchists, people who are amongst the protesters who are doing certain things that's going against the initial plan of action that they want to receive from doing these protests and resisting, because people want to say riots, right? And partially it may be true, but this is a rebellion. These are people that are rebelling. They are acting out. When you don't deal with your issues, as Kaidi and I have talked about before with guests we've had on here, when a nation or a person doesn't deal with their issues, what happens? It builds up, right? It builds up and people lash out, right? So this is people, whether you recognize or not, they're lashing out, saying enough is enough, right? Like we have reached our tipping point. We have reached our zenith of being able to kind of like, okay, you know, hopefully, you know, we're going to go to law enforcement or we're going to go to elected officials going to make this thing work. People are tired. People are fed up. People are exhausted. Yes, sir.
Weren't they this exalted back in 1965 and 68? Didn't we see the same thing take place back then? Didn't we see the same thing happen with you know, live and let live, or, you know, can we all just get along? What's his name? That riot that took place in LA in '96?
Yeah, Rodney King.
Did we see the same type of
unrest? Which was the largest civil unrest,
right?
Pre this.
Right.
Yeah.
So
right.
It's not like what's going on today is any new. I don't see, to a large extent, any different. I don't see it. What I do see is consistency in that it falls to a stereotype, whereas the powers that be are going to say, okay, first of all, I think it's under a whole larger agenda, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to stay on this point.
Okay.
What I think is going to happen, or God forbid, I don't want to put the words out there in the universe and stuff like that. I'm just going to take it from a historical reference point of view, or
right,
from an historical reference point of view.
Right. And what could happen?
What could happen, or what has been happening, that the powers that be, all the people that know psychology and how the human mind works, and the therapists and all that stuff, these think tanks, so to speak, got together and say, okay, yeah, we're hitting them with this, we're hitting them with this, and we're hitting them with this. Here's our plan. is chess, not checkers.
Right.
Whereas, okay, if they take it to a larger extent, then what we'll have to do, we'll have no other choice but to bring in martial law.
Mm-hmm.
Give us validation for annihilating a certain populace, which we had planned on annihilating anyway, but now we had the license to do so because it's affecting the populace at large. So if we have to kill a few for the sake of many, this gives us a license to do so. So if they do take this situation, which is why we're pumping it out like that, which is why we haven't stopped the police in these certain situations. We know people who have smartphones and they're going to record it. We know the result is going to be an uproar in society and people are going to react to it. Good. Let them react to that extent, whereas now we have a legal right to exterminate and fall right in line with the Bill Gates depopulation agenda. That's one scenario.
Okay.
That scenario doesn't work out to those who are above the fray, so to speak, who are orchestrating this other thing. Then the other thing is going to be, we go back to how it was before, where they're going to do protests like they did in Ferguson for about a few weeks, and then it's going to die down, and everything is going to go back to normal, and we're going to still have the killings that we've been having all along before, and probably initiate more stricter methods, whereas now we're going to take the right away for those to have cameras and film. We already have cops with films on their chests. That's enough. We'll persecute and deal with the cops who turn the camera off, but the cameras on the cops' chest is enough. We don't need civilians filming these atrocities to cause another uproar that's been happening that has been costing the city money. So just look at it from scenario 2, where they'll get tired, go back to their homes because they're tired of doing all this other stuff, and we'll go back to normal, annihilating certain populace little by little like we've been doing, and allow COVID to take care of the rest when the second wave of COVID comes in the fall.
Looks like COVID is not doing anything right now.
No.
I posted.
But that was already designed because they knew when the weather got warmer, it would be a decline. And then when the weather gets colder, it's going to be an incline because they have no vaccine that they can legally put out that's effective, won't be ready for another 12 months to 18 months, a year and a half.
Right. And that's a whole nother thing with vaccines and being vaccinated and, certain vaccines, because not all vaccines are bad. So I don't want to get into that blanket statement. But no, all those scenarios you mentioned could possibly happen. And those situations, some of those situations even happened during the 60s. Which was some of the most turbulent times in American history from 1960 to 1969. So, these things could happen, but again, it's a tough thing, man, because not everybody's meant to be on the front lines protesting. Not everybody's meant to be, marching down the streets. Not to say that's not a good thing, but everybody plays their position, man. And that's one thing I learned doing grassroots organizing, like everybody plays their position. Not everybody in the civil rights movement was out there marching. There was some people that were handing out the flyers. There was some people who were organizing events. There was some people that were just making sure that people they were out there, but they made sure people stay safe as possible or stay from getting assaulted. There were people that were doing certain things that don't get the credibility. It takes what a public enemy say? It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. The fact that they're doing all this stuff shows you the power that we have within. If we just harness it and recognize it and work amongst each other. I was talking with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about like businesses and like entrepreneurship and economics, right? Like, and they had mentioned about like, they burning down like the businesses and the community and certain businesses like a Popeyes or like banks and certain forth. And I'm like, well, you have to think about it, that depending on who set it off, depending on who set the fires, and depending on what the purpose of those establishments serve to the community, discerns whether it gets treated with hatred or like as a part of the system, or it's like absolved, like, oh no, don't mess with that. Don't mess with that over there. Like that's we use that, Remember we talked about before in our podcast, neighborhoods versus communities. We live in neighborhoods. We don't live in communities anymore. Rarely. There are very few communities. Communities are commune, right? Communities come from family, right? When you have, and it's not all our fault either. When I'm saying these things, family, I'm saying it's systemic, right? Meaning that I'm not blaming anyone, not any of us. Now, do we have a part to play? Sure. But there are things that systemically they have set up for us to react in certain ways and to create certain scenarios where we're at a disadvantage. That's what I'm saying, right? So when they burned down a Popeyes, I'm like, well, did that Popeye serve the community properly? Because personally, it's trash. You know what I'm saying? Like Popeyes is, I don't care if you can season up however you want, Popeyes is trash. And I said it. And if you want to debate me on that, go look it up on the website and look how many chemicals they pump in that chicken. Just saying. Now, does it serve a purpose because people have jobs? Yeah, sure, I understand that. But as far as our total health, especially as far as fighting COVID, it's trash. It's trash. I'm just here to tell you that. Like, if you ask me, it's trash. You know what I'm saying? McDonald's is trash. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just real. I'm just being real with you. So when we talk about these things in reference of how we engage and how we inform ourselves and how we empower ourselves, we need to look within. We need to look within our circle. We don't need to boycott anything. I know T.I., put out the boycott, and respect the brother T.I. He put out like the 1-day boycott or whatnot. And 1 day is cool, but you don't have to boycott if you got your own. Think about that. You ain't got to boycott no one if you have your own. Nice. That's why I want us to get at. That's why I'm trying to push us and trying to push myself into. We don't got to boycott anyone if we already have it. I don't have to boycott a bank if we got our own bank. I don't have to boycott a food establishment if we have our own food establishment, because we're already empowering ourselves through recycling the dollar, recycling the energy that money and that currency and that fiat brings. That's why I want to be. That's why a lot of our brothers and sisters in the 60s, they were moving towards that. But what happened? They broke up the family. Early 1970s, late 1960s, early 1970s. They sent out the government order of the welfare. You see what I'm saying? If you do your history and do the knowledge, there's a lot of layers to this. Very much so. And Kaidi, what you said, man, it's on point. When is enough enough? And then when we talk about risk involved, there's always going to be a risk involved. We're Black in America. There's always a risk every single day. As a Black man, as an African American, an African in America, every time I step outside, there's a risk. Right. Every time my brother, my father, my cousins, men and women and children might add you, there's always a risk. Now, do I want to put myself in harm's way? No, of course not. Right. Of course I don't want to do that. Right. But James Baldwin said to be Black in America is to be angry almost all the time.
Conscious.
Black
and conscious in America.
And conscious. And he also stated that to fight racism is to put your life at danger.
Yeah.
Those who practice white supremacy and racism, they don't have that problem because it's a self-perpetuating system. So even if they die or even if they're not pulling the strings themselves, it's already working. It's self-perpetuating. Whereas I or Kaide or someone else or other people have to put their lives literally on the line to be able to fight racism. Think about that. Just as having this conversation.
You brought up some very good.
Yeah, just as having this conversation. I'm not even marching in the streets. We're not even marching in the streets, but just having this conversation is a threat to that system. If you want to learn more read Dr. Neely Fuller. Look up Dr. Neely Fuller. There's some homework for us. Dr. Neely Fuller, look up that and see what he says about racism and white supremacy. And holla at us. I mean, the information is there, is what I'm saying. It's there. If you do the research, it's been there.
Oh man, you brought up some good point. Okay, so here's two things today. You're right on with that, Kyle. We don't have to boycott anything if we have our own. That's awesome. We don't have to boycott the bank if we have our own bank. Oh, that's fantastic. I think that perception, that viewpoint adds to the many other ways to go about this. So I definitely, props to you. So with that said, I guess where I'm coming from is from the vantage point of, to an extent, a reality check, right? So it would be ideal if we as a community, a culture, part of that checklist would be to build the community.
Right.
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 Which ties into what you're saying. In building that community, we can then build our banks. We can then build our stores. We can then do that. I think if we think about it and break it down, if we focus more of our energies towards that approach in building for ourselves and stop spending money on these companies and in these environments that don't really care for us, and start instead following the We Buy Black and investing in our own, that includes building up banks and coming together with those who have the experience in how to build a bank and necessary paperwork and stuff like that. Then we, by cause of result, would not have to consider putting ourselves on the front line. That wouldn't be an issue because we would have our own, to the extent that even though we're building our own, always be mindful of what took place in Black Wall Street.
Definitely.
Right? Being at the ready, being the Panthers, so to speak. Right? Whereas we can defend ourselves against the injustice that is dead bent on destroying what we build so we don't have to depend on, right? Which then puts us in a situation where we have no other choice and then have to be on the front lines and battle this thing like we're doing now because we already did the Black Wall Street. Had that been allowed to continue, we would have been what you're talking about, where you're talking about right now, where we wouldn't have to concern ourselves with boycotting. But
and there were multiple ones too. There was one, not just the one in Tulsa. There was one in North Carolina and somewhere else as well.
Exactly. And like you said, also you pointed out. Oh, I lost my train of thought. But like you pointed out, like you pointed out, how it's systematic, right? Where I didn't even know. You taught me. Whereas when we started moving along those lines and building ourselves, they systematically, strategically brought in welfare. That purposely break up the most powerful thing that you said, which is the family.
Right. The most revolutionary thing you can do is raise a Black family.
Right.
That's the most. That's one of the most. That if not the most, one of the most revolutionary things you do. Why? Because you pass on the heritage. You pass on the culture. You pass on the wealth of previous generations. You know.
So with that said, Cal, bringing it full circle. I think we have to work simultaneously with investing in our own. That we do already. We did that before. Right. But now
and we're doing it now.
Right.
We're doing it now.
Do it now. But this time with the acute awareness of what happened in the past to make sure it doesn't happen again, which is the terrorist attack that took place on Black Wall Street, to be prepared for that now, more so than we were back then, one. And then number two, delicately touch on the situation, whereas, just say, for example, and just keep it real. If you have a segment of those who approach this from the nonviolent area, I don't know, I'm just putting this out there, and then something happens to someone they love. I mean, not a group, not just a family, but I'm talking about someone that they, like a mom, for example. Right? A child who has a personal relationship with their parents, be it their mother, their father, or both, that they confide in, who's been their support system all their life, the only person that they love wholeheartedly, and then have them die in the unjust manner that the deaths have occurred today. Now, I wonder if that approach would be the same as in comparison to Europeans or whites, whereas the atrocities that happen to us as a culture, their viewpoint on it is, this is wrong, this is an atrocity, this shouldn't happen, and speak up that way. That's to the extent that they work, they contribute, right? Because it happens to a culture that is not theirs. But then have it turn around, like the COVID took place, and people had to wear masks, and they thought it was slavery. And they, without importunity, resist the mandate that came down from the government to do social distancing and stay quarantined in the house.
Right.
My reaction to that is, excuse my language, fuck that. I'm going outside. I'm going in the park. I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care what you say. You're not holding me in slavery. So now turn it around, bringing it back to that scenario where we want on taking the nonviolent approach. All of a sudden, our family member that we care for so much dies in an atrocity act like that. Would we still have the capacity or the restraint to still approach this atrocity that happened to us and our home directly on the front door? Will we still have the mental, physical, spiritual capacity, physical capacity to restrain ourselves and still take that nonviolent approach now that it hit us in the home directly?
Right. And that's the battle that a lot of people face, man. Yeah, that's a good one, man. Because, we're asking to be nonviolent against those people who are violent against us. And I think people have to realize when Dr. King did the strategy, it was a strategy of nonviolence. It was to show the ineptitude and the violence of our aggressors. It was to show how aggressive they were against us as Black people here in this country, as African people in this country. And it was a tactic. And luckily, and what was one of the best things was TV, was the camera. He used the camera, him and his team used the camera to say, hey, look, you all, we're being as nonviolent as we can, peaceful protests as we possibly can. And they're still being heavily aggressive with us and violent against us. We're not getting in the face. We're not throwing stuff on them. We're not fighting them. We're literally just saying our piece. But look how aggressive they are against us. And that was a tactic that he used to get Kennedy to say, okay, man, we got to do something, man, because this is making us look bad. Right? This is making us look bad. And now you have everybody has a portable camera with their phones, and then they're still filming it. But as you see with Philando Castile, with Ahmaud Arbery, when they use it against him, of course, and George Floyd, he looked right in the camera and said, what? Like, so you got a camera, so what? I'm in control. That is nothing but pure hatred, right? That is a mentality that is so absolved from humanity.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like that, like we showed the clip with Toni Morrison. Our morality was never in question.
Right.
Oh. I mean, Black folks, our humanity was never in question, right? The problem is you got a problem. Because you got a problem, we got a problem, right? So, people only gonna be peaceful for so long, which you see as you see what's happening, right? And this ain't even, again, let me go back to what's happening right now. A lot of protesters aren't even Black folk. A lot of protesters are people who are not Black, African American. So that shows you on another level that it must have, excuse my language, must have really hit the fan, because it's not even mostly us out there. It's other ethnicities. So apparently they see, at least they have some bit of humanity and emotion, because I would be scared more so if people didn't show emotion, because that shows that there's some nugget of humanity still left in them to say this is not right. This is foul on many levels.
Pretty good.
So lucky, and again, when I say you, I'm talking about the system and law enforcement at large. They are lucky that it's just buildings that are burning. That's unfortunate. It's mostly buildings that are burning, which I don't think people have really thought about that. They're out of all the anger and hurt that people are feeling, there are only buildings that are be burning right now. If you go to other countries, there's other things that people can burn. You know what I'm saying? And I've seen video, man, it's horrific. Horrific. But they're just property right now. People, man, oh man. I was talking to one of my friends, man. People gotta go back and watch Do the Right Thing, man. Like people gotta go back and watch man, that film, bro, like Do the Right Thing, man, is so deep on so many levels, man. Because when Spike showed the movie in France, right? When Spike, this is a little film history for your family that ties into what's going on now. Spike showed the film in France, and he said a lot of people came up to him in France when he showed the film in France. I don't know why it's Cannes Film Festival. People like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Mookie did that. Or I can't believe, they burned down Sal's Pizzeria. Fuck Sal's Pizzeria. A man just got killed by the cops by just playing his radio loud. A building can, like he said, a building can get burned. A building get burned and you can build it back. Radio Raheem is dead.
Yeah, you can't get him.
I can't get a life back.
Can't get a life back.
Ahmaud Arbery can't get his life back.
Right.
Breonna Taylor can't get her life back.
Right.
George Floyd can't get his life back.
Right.
Eric Garner can't get his life back. Emmett Till can't get his life back. Right. Dr. King can't get his life back. Malcolm X can't get his life back.
Damn.
Should I go on? Should I go on? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is historical. So if they're burning a Popeyes, a Target, those are corporate structures that, again, I'm a business owner, so I understand. I'm not saying that it doesn't have any wherewithal so far, but in comparison to what has happened, the injustices and the murder of these people, I could give a damn about a building. If it's about my brother and sister's life versus the building, hey, we can build that building back. As damaging as it might be, we can build that back. We can't build that person back. That person has left this world. And that's what people are trying to say. Listen, right? Listen to us. Because it will come on your door. Listen, please. Like, they're saying, listen, pay attention, do something about this.
The reality of it is, and it's been brought out before, that no one cared about the crack epidemic, all right? Or the powers that be didn't care about the crack epidemic.
That's another war on our community, the crack epidemic. That's another war, another chemical warfare that they exalted on our community to commit genocide. And when I talk about genocide, go ask the UN what I'm talking about, right? When we talk about the chemical warfare has been on our community for years, right? The physical, chemical, and maybe some people say spiritual warfare that has been on our community. But I digress. I'm sorry, man.
That's the point I was getting to. Everybody turned a blind eye, and then Dave Chappelle, he brought it full front in his comedy, right? Right? Just get along. What? No, he said, just say no. Just say no, right? Right? So what about just saying no to now the whole drug epidemic that's hitting the white communities now? Now it's an issue now. Before it wasn't an issue. Before it wasn't a pandemic.
Right.
Before it was isolated to a certain community and their weakness towards discipline, their lack of discipline. Now it's hitting your community. I don't hear the same argument being said now. Lack of discipline for those in your community. Now it's a pandemic. Now it's an issue.
Right. Where's the compassion? Where's the compassion for us? Where was it? Because I mean, we had it for ourselves, but where's the outside compassion?
Right. So, bruh. Okay. So, go ahead, Cal. Before we go transition, man, to the next.
Oh no, man! It's a lot, man. I mean, man, shout out to my people, man, in Minnesota, Memphis, Louisville, Chicago, LA, Houston, Dallas, Nashville. Shout out, man, like, because I'm with y'all, solidarity all the way, 100%, and this is also a time for us to organize, like really thoroughly organize and really hone in on what our skills and our assets are to each other and exploit the fact that again, who's going to look out for our best interests? We are.
Right. Very good.
We're going to look out for our best interests.
Very good.
Right. If you're expecting someone else outside of us to look out for our best interests better than us, it's not going to happen. It's just not. And for my young folk out there, let this be a lesson to you. You're living in history right now. This is an opportunity for you to reset. This is the opportunity to help get some of your elders on track. Because some of us have fallen off the track and forgotten, you know, or had, I'll say, amnesia, right? This is an opportunity for you all to say, hey, we still catching hell out here, right? Y'all caught hell in the 60s and the 50s and the 30s and the 40s and the 20s and the 10s and the 1890s. And the
this ain't the start of the country.
Yeah, we're still catching it. Right.
Since we landed on Plymouth Rock, or as Malcolm X said, Plymouth Rock landed on us.
Yes, right. Exactly. Right. Plymouth Rock landed on us. Right. Plymouth Rock landed on the Native Americans, on the indigenous people in this country. You know, one of my boys posted, you know, rebellion and looting. Right. Rebellion and looting is an American as apple pie. Right. So when we talk about, you know, the problem with looting and rioting, y'all, that's how y'all develop the country. You know what I'm saying? So let's call a spade a spade.
Exactly.
Right. So
exactly.
Again, when you know your history and you know your position, these things as damaging and as hurt and as saddened as I am, you know, I know this isn't new, right? And a lot of my peers know this isn't new. It's just how are we going to respond from here? Or how have we been responding leading up to this? You know, Kaide and I and a lot of my brothers and sisters who are in the educational and entrepreneurial space, we've been doing the work. And the work is still being done. And you have to support these people out, family, who are out there doing that work. The healers, the entrepreneurs, the martial artists, the educators, the medical physicians. They've been, you know, like the people who are literally building the buildings with their hands, the blue collar worker. Like, these people are doing the work, whether you know it or not. And you all have to support them, because if we don't, then we wonder, like, where's the community? Where's
no. If you don't, it's a high likelihood or high percentage that it's going to come at you at your front door and affect you or your family members directly.
Yeah, man.
So you can hide all you want. Like they say, there's no place to hide. So you either deal with it now or you're going to deal with it later.
Right. Exactly.
Ask the white folks. They thought they could put it under the rug and leave it within the community. And now look, it's staring them right in the face. They dealing with it directly with their loved ones.
Man, voice of the voiceless, man. Voice of the voiceless. You know, rioting or rebellion is the voice of the voiceless, man.
And let me say this one other thing, Cal. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm going to make this clear because I want to make sure I'm understood. Like you
understood.
Understood, right? Like
understand.
Family, like Kyle said, and I get it because my mom was like this too. If you're not cut out, if it's not in you, if you're not led to be in battle or be on the front line, that's not for you. Don't feel because what's going on, you have to put yourself, because you have to put yourself out there and fight, because what you're doing is you're being ineffective,
right?
And you're causing more of a problem than a solution, because you're not made for it. You're not cut for that. So if you're not cut for that to be on the front, that's not you. But if you have a knack to communicate, if you have a knack to relate to people, if you have a knack to phrase things where people can understand, then that's where you fight. That's your fight right there. Then you build circles where you can communicate effectively what's going on the front lines. That's your calling. If your calling is math, then that's your calling to be able to collect funds and finances to support the movement, to leverage this to make the world a better place. If you're good with numbers and you're good with financial management, then that's your calling. It makes no sense for you to be on the front line where you stand a chance of being killed when your skill was better used in the administration aspect of it, where you can help direct and manage the finances to make the movement that much more popular. If your area is history and you like reading and you collect information, then that's what you use. And you collect the information to give to those in the administration department, to give to those on the front line, to better leverage their effectiveness in putting an end to this. So I'm saying all that, and I can give examples upon examples upon examples, but just picking up on Kyle's point, we're not saying that everybody's got to be on the front line and fight.
Right, that's not where everybody's at. Should be at.
That's for those who are called, who have an ability to that, whose spirit is burning, where that's their calling. That's what they do. That's who's supposed to be there, which also ties into the community we're talking about, Kyle, when we build the Black Wall Street, right? Those who are built for the front line are those who are on the front line to protect the Black Wall Street, to protect the infrastructure from being destroyed. That's how we organize effectively, to put those in their right positions to do the most job effectively, because there's a place for everything and everything is in its place. If you ever heard it before, I'm not sure.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, definitely. I haven't heard that in a while.
But that's what it comes down to. Each and every one of us have a specific place. We play a specific role. And the job is to identify what that specific role is so we can take our right place. So that way we can be more effective in progressing this thing forward and getting rid of, as best we can, as most we can, the racism and the illness and the sickness that's affecting this country, the United States of America, so everybody can live and let live.
Right, man. You said it perfectly, brother. It's not either or, it's both. And I think Dr. Neely Fuller talked about that in his book. He said that, if you experience racism, it's not to say like your racism is bigger or lesser than mine. This is all true. It's all true. Whether it's racism against a Black woman, African-American woman, or African-American man, is not to say, well, they treat me like this office. Well, they treat me like this in the office. It's like, okay, this isn't the racism Olympics. You know what I'm saying? Like this, we all are getting discriminated against, and it's all valid. It's all valid. It comes out in different ways. It's all valid. So for me to lessen yours is to be different as well. But again, it's not to focus on it. It's to say, okay, now how do we come together and make that situation, either eradicate that situation or lessen that situation to the best of our ability? How do we do that together? You know what I'm saying? And that's what we have to get to. This is a time for us to really corral with each other, especially during COVID. We have nothing but time. We have nothing but time during COVID. We should be strategizing, planning, so we fully come out of this thing with that much more engaged, with that much more informed and empowered with each other. Again, we're doing Great Rising Collective, not just to talk and just to run our mouths, just to empower us, to help give you something to go and study and review and use to empower you. As Kaide and I mentioned, as he mentioned earlier, we are educators. There's a difference between an educator and a teacher. I teach. We educate. Right? There's a difference. People don't know the difference. To educate, right? To teach is just for us to have the lesson at hand and just to regurgitate. That's teaching, which is valid because we do that. That is a skill. Educator is a profession. It is a calling. It is engaging and assessing and analysis and a listening to the people that you are engaging with to better serve them. It is a service to the community to be an educator, right? So when we come to these platforms, we want to be able to help empower you all with the information that we have came across, and also you all empower us with your responses and what experiences you have had. And what the brother is sharing is spot on. He's spot on. So again, family, it's not either or, it's both, right? And as tragic as the situation is, if it doesn't bring us closer together, then the tragedy is in that this brother and these sisters have lost their lives in vain if we haven't come together and made a tighter unit, able to fight this real virus, as the lady mentioned in the clip we played earlier, of racism, white supremacy.
Yo, education and educator and a teacher, two different things. Powerful, brother. All right.
They're related, but they're different.
We are at the hour, actually 5 minutes after. You know how we do.
Yeah, but we're going over. Yeah, we're going over today.
We're going to go.
Yeah.
We're going to go over.
Yeah.
What we just touched on was the atrocity that has taken place, or the attack, as it were, on black lives from authority figures. These are police officers, in large, whose job was and is to serve and protect. There's another video, Kyle, that I should have queued up, but I didn't.
Yeah.
In regards to, I think I shared it with you. I shared you the link with the officer who admitted that what he's seeing now, what he thought was isolated incidences.
Oh, yes.
Right, with bad cops, and that's just dumb or what have you. He's starting to see now it's becoming more proliferated, right? If I use the right word. And he called them out. And this officer, law enforcement professional that called him out, lost his job by telling the truth.
You know, as a police officer, I'm compelled to make this video. I've been in law enforcement for 10 years, and I'm speaking to my peers, other fellow officers, people in any kind of law enforcement position. I've seen officers nationwide enforcing tyrannical orders against the people, and I'm hoping it's the minority of officers, but I'm not sure anymore, because every time I turn on the television, every time I look to the internet, I'm seeing people arrested or cited for going to church, for traveling on the roadways, for going surfing, opening their businesses, going to the park with their families, or doing nails out of their own house, using their own house as a place of business, and having undercover agents go there and arrest them and charge them with what? With a crime? I don't know what crime people are committing by doing nails in their own house, but we're seeing this more and more and more, and we need to start looking at ourselves as officers and thinking, is what I'm doing right? Now, I want to remind you that regardless of where you stand on the coronavirus, we don't have the authority to do those things to people just because a mayor or a governor tells you otherwise. I don't care if it's your sergeant or your chief of police. We don't get to violate people's constitutional rights because somebody in our chain of command tells us otherwise. It's not how this country works. Those are de facto arrests. You know, we're violating people's rights and taking money from them, or even worse, arresting them and depriving them of their freedom when they are exercising their constitutional rights. So let's talk about that. Let's read something right here off of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Among these, we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their power from the consent of the governed, meaning our power and any government official's power is derived from the people. Okay? We don't hold power over our citizens. It's contradictory to everything that our country stands for. And this is what I'm seeing. First Amendment rights, telling people they can't go to church, freedom of religion. Okay? Telling people they can't protest, freedom of assembly. Fourth Amendment violations, illegal traffic stops to check for papers. What are you, the Gestapo? Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? You don't get to stop people unless you have reasonable suspicion or probable cause that they have committed a crime. And I know people that have personally been stopped saying, we want to see papers showing that you're essential.
David 2, copy a phone call.
That is not how our job works, okay? What really has been pissing me off lately is the fact that these officers that are going out here and enforcing these tyrannical orders, what they're doing is they're making my job and my safety, or they're putting my job and my safety at risk. Because what you're doing is you're widening the gap between public trust and law enforcement officers.
And now, from what I hear, they're doing like they're looking at it more. I think it was suggested by one of the people on the social media lines where, this lady, I didn't share this with you, but I did like it on my Facebook platform. This white woman, and my heart goes out in appreciation to those who are not black, and I'm gonna put it out there. This white woman, I appreciate her for her honesty and for her courage, because she brought this suggestion out where she said, and I've never heard this from a white person before.
Okay.
And it was powerful. She said law enforcement officers should be held to a higher standard. Whereas if they do this atrocity, they should, as a result, not only be arrested, but they should also serve a life sentence, if not death.
This situation, however, has me so bothered, so pissed off. I am trying to not take judgment in my own hands. I am trying to hold on to my religion, as they say, because there's that justice piece that I carry. I have a really strong justice bent. Always have, probably always will. As a kid, used to get in fights constantly, defending the underdog. Never got in a fight like for myself. Always defending. So I have a really strong justice bent. And so watching the video yesterday, I don't give a rat's behind what transpired prior to this cop holding this man down. It does not matter, simply because the fact of what I saw was this man was fully detained and no longer struggling. He was handcuffed, belly down on the freaking ground, and barely breathing, right? Pleading for his life that he couldn't breathe. This police officer, who is trained in, self-defense measures, trained in the ability to detain someone, knew that this person was no longer a threat, that the force that was being used was no longer necessary. I am so livid. I don't care. I'm so watching my words, you guys. I'm so trying to be careful with my words right now, because I obviously want to respect and honor my audience as well. I don't care that he got fired. Who cares that these police officers got fired? I want the gosh darn trial to start, because this was straight up, no questions asked, murder. This was murder. This was a lynching of sorts. Whether it was racially motivated or not, I don't care. I don't care if the man was black, if he was Oriental, if he was Hispanic, or he was another white man. What happened was straight up murder. Now, with that said, I am not going to detract from the fact that this was a black man. I don't get the racism thing. So I have been one of the people that have been like, no, this can't be racially motivated. you know, and I hear the black community with, you know, the Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, and I hear them in saying there's so much racism going on. And for people like me that don't have a grid for racism, I don't see it because I don't relate to it. So first of all, forgive me for not having that lens. I don't ever want to have that lens. But I don't also want to detract from my brothers and sisters that are going through hell. And if that is the case, it is going to take every freaking white American to stand up and make a difference. To stand up and say, oh, hell no, not in my country, not on my watch, not in my lifetime. This is going to stop. If this is actually what's going on, that we have Black Americans that are literally afraid of law enforcement because this kind of crap is going on, it's not the Black Americans' responsibility to stand up and try and change that. If it is rooted in racism, if it is rooted in any kind of white supremacist crap, it is our job to stand up. I will tell you that I have been one that's like, okay, so when there's a Muslim terrorist attack, the Muslims need to stand up and reject those people out of their religion, right? The peaceful, loving, wonderful Muslims need to go, oh, well, hell no, you're not Muslim. Get the hell out. I'm saying the same thing for white people. We need to stand up and look at whoever this is, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's whatever organization of white people, and say, oh, hell no, you are not American. Oh, hell no, you don't embody what we stand for. And oh, hell no, you're not welcome in this country, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how to fix this problem other than every white American using their peer pressure and saying, this is not okay. And I will say the only thing I can think of that might change this within law enforcement is there needs to be, you know, special circumstances that if a law enforcement officer unduly causes the death of no matter what color the person is, they need to be like prosecuted worse because they're supposed to have a standard that is far and above beyond any of us, right? They're law enforcement. They should be elevated to a much higher standard and bar than the rest of us. Therefore, in my opinion, they should be prosecuted at a higher standard. In my opinion only. And you guys can disagree. You can say I'm half-cocked. I don't really care. My opinion, those officers need to face the death penalty. Period. I don't know what else would be worse. And I don't mean the death penalty in some cushy prison either. I'm pissed off. If this is what's going on in our country, it's your responsibility and it's my responsibility to put a stop to it. It's not the victim's responsibility to put a stop to it. It's just like this freaking Me Too movement. People need to step in and stop the perpetrators. Don't make the victims have to put a stop to it and be victimized further. The Black community should not be leading this. This needs to be led by the white community. We need to put a stop to this. I'm certainly hoping that there is something on the agenda at the federal government level that's going, okay, enough is a freaking enough. I totally believe in backing the blue. I totally believe in law enforcement and the good men and women that are called to be civil servants that have a heart for humanity and community in general. Totally back them. But those that shouldn't be, those that are tainted, those that have their own agendas, those that are power hungry, those that have polluted the system, they need to be dealt with, and they need to be dealt with harshly.
Because of their role. They have been specifically trained in how to deal with situations as it relates to civilians.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in mass. So it's not like they're dealing as a one-to-one situation, the way the system is set up, where it's one cop against one civilian. They operate in mass, whereas always designed with one civilian against a group of law enforcement professionals. As you saw with Floyd, where there were 4 officers there to restrain one man. If you have that much backing, there should be no excuse or reason for you to take a civilian's life, especially when you've been trained not to.
Or maybe trained to.
Hold on. That cannot be admitted. That's not on the record books. We can't say that. That's not according to the guidelines. That's not legal. Right? So we know, but according to policy, taking another civilian's life is not acceptable unless that civilian causes harm or presents that threat, whereas that civilian is carrying a weapon enough to annihilate or do harm to law enforcement professionals who are designed to serve and protect. So they would have to be in the role of serving and protecting. And in that action of serving and protecting, the civilian is literally taking out an armed weapon to try and do harm to those officers who are supposed to serve and protect. Under those circumstances, is that law enforcement professional allowed to exhort to extenuating means or extensive means as to not just protect themselves, but to protect the public at large? That's the only reason why an officer is allowed to use force like that on a civilian, because it's affecting the populace at large, not necessarily them. Because their job, part of their job, and the risk, a part of their job that they sign on is the loss of life. They sign on to become a police officer. They willingly admit that they are at risk of losing their life. That's a part of the job. So even if a civilian is taking a gun out and he's willing, is not the officers is not there to protect their own lives. They have to subdue that civilian because of the threat that civilian may have to the populace, the lives that don't include them. Wanted to leave that there.
Let me add on briefly to what you said, brother, because that was definitely on point. I saw this footage, and you may have seen it already, family, about this African American brother who's a police officer in Atlanta. I think his Officer Murphy was his last name. And he was talking to the crowd at this, I think, the CNN building in Atlanta, and people are, they're upset, and but he's talking to them like, hey, he said he has a son who's 31 and a son who's 15. And he said, I tell him about the police as well. I tell him about the police, like how to engage and whatnot. So I have these talks. I'm a police officer and I'm having these talks with my sons, So that shows you, man, the dichotomy and the double consciousness, as W.B. Du Bois talked about in The Souls of Black Folks. See, what I'm saying? And that was 1903, like the double consciousness, what they call cultural schizophrenia. Right? Cultural schizophrenia. Yeah, man. Yeah, the cultural schizophrenia, man. Like, even him as a black officer has to talk to his sons about dealing with other police officers. That's nuts, man. That's crazy. Like think of a system, y'all. Think of a system that promotes that where that flourishes. Like, again, when I have these talks, I was talking, because I talk and I engage, family. I was having a talk with one of my peers a week ago, and I'm like, what type of system does it take in order to create these type of environments, man? You know what I'm saying? Like homelessness, police brutality. What type of system promotes that type of behavior? What type of society promotes that type of behavior?
It's the society that permits that type of system.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. And that shows you where the root. What Angela Davis, I wrote the quote down too. Quote by Angela Davis. I'm gonna put it up in the chat too. It says, radically simply means grasping things at the root. Radical simply means grabbing things at the root.
Gotcha.
Right? That's radical. The fact that someone is radical, that means they're just going to the root of the cause. That's seen as radical. That's seen as radical. right?
Nice.
That's the elder Angela Davis for you, man. Like, I mean, again, man, family, the info is out there, the knowledge and the action. Because see, here's the thing, right? A lot of people are like, yeah, we should go out and we should do this and do that and be on the front lines, and that's cool. But the truly sexy thing is get your people together, organize, empower yourselves, when you don't have to help anybody else. But that's not sexy though.
Yeah,
that's not sexy. That's not sexy to eat right. You know what I'm saying? Get your mind together, organize with your people, and create something where you don't have to depend on other people and systems to do it for you, right? But they push that away. You know what I'm saying? They push away meditation. They push away eating right. Oh, they push away going back to nature. They no, that can't be a solution. But these are solutions. Yes.
Before we transition, we want to recap real quick. Tangibles and solutions. All right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we'll hit it both sides or what have you. I'll talk about tangible and solutions as it relates to law enforcement, right? So in regards to law enforcement, some tangibles and solutions would be, I would say, to whether you realize it or not, the Constitution. I have seen, and it's real, all right? You can't be lazy now. I mean, you can be lazy if you want to, but then these are the consequences that you're going to face, right? If you're upset, part of this week has been very tough for me. I can only speak for me, but it's been very tough for me because it weighed on my soul. It weighed on my spirit. It weighed on my consciousness because of the needless attack and the loss of life of these individuals in a world like this that baffles my mind, and it affected me, right? So I'm just saying that to say that you choose to put it aside since it's not on your front step, you ain't got to deal with it, but it's at your own cost. So with that said, it's in your best interest to read the Constitution, because the Constitution, although it's just paper and they don't admit to it, but the fact that you know that will carry a lot of weight when and if it comes down to the point where it takes you to the legalities of what's going on. And there are other people who want to say, you know what's going on. You can articulate yourself very carefully, and it'll help you in the long run if you get to that point of legalities in the courts and stuff like that. It'll definitely carry it, and it'll give your attorney or whoever you have representing you some ammo which to use, because once you're conscious of the Constitution, then you know how to act when confronted with those situations. That way you won't be doing yourself a disjustice where they'll have something to hold against you, which will negate your whole defense. You won't have anything to defend on because your actions they will use to warrant the behavior or the treatment that they gave you. So when you know your constitutional rights, you then protect yourself and you arm yourself against those things. So know the Constitution. The other benefit to that, know your rights, is there are many cops and officers who adhere to the Constitution. So if you're able to, in that situation, articulate yourself and contain your emotion as best you can in order to get some of those words out that's in the Constitution as it relates to the rights with law enforcement, there are a lot of officers that will hold back.
Right, speaking that in the signs in the background.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the signs in the
background. Yeah,
because that it's spiritual. They know. So that's what I'm saying. They know it's timing. Brother. Nothing's by happenstance. It's all. It ain't no coincidence. It's this everything that happens for a reason. So there have been proven cases where there has been someone who's been approached by cops, not in their right, but they knew their rights. They knew it according to the Constitution, and you'd be surprised how the police officers act. I'm not talking about one police officer, Kyle, family. I'm talking about there were 4 officers. There are videos of this on YouTube where the police officer, because the person was standing there and they knew their rights, and they spoke their rights to the officers, it paralyzed the officers because they explained themselves articulately first. The words coming out their mouth it wasn't, fuck this, man. Yo, leave me alone. Get out of here. Get the fuck away from me. It wasn't none of that. It was, according to the Constitution,
Because some of them don't know it, or like you said, they know enough of it. Like, oh, okay, like that. They know the power. They know those words. They know that law.
There you go, Cal. It works. It works. It paralyzes them. It paralyzes them. And then if they go so far, you have a constitutional right. And then I'm gonna give it over to you, Cal, because I know you got a lot you want to add. But these are things we're giving you. And then if the officers are so ignorant or so caught up in their emotions, or they had a bad day and they're trying to take it on you, you have a constitutional right to ask for the officer's supervisor. Get their supervisor on record. They have to call. If they're not the supervisor, they have to call their supervisor and bring their supervisor in. Changes the whole dynamic because the supervisor is holding to another account. Get some trust. Then there was a situation, real talk, it just happened, I just saw it on the feed. An officer who was trying to arrest this civilian, claiming he fixed the description. Had the acuity enough, right? Because his wife or girlfriend was filming it.
Wow.
Had the acuity enough to ask, well, let me see a picture. He wasn't even speaking the Constitution, Cal. He was just standing his ground saying it's right. He asked, well, let me see a picture of the description you say that I fit. Listen to this. Tangibles and solutions, action steps. Had the right to ask, let me see the picture of who you're claiming I fit the description of. Constitutionally, you had to. You even have a right not to show your ID. You have a constitution right not to do that unless they have some right to call you over. So the cop had another cop pull up, go to his car, get his phone, the description on the phone, bring it to the officer. The officer showed the civilian, and the civilian and the officer looked at it and said, that's not me. That doesn't even look like me. It was filmed, and guess what? Guess what the two officers ended up doing in response?
What?
Letting him go.
There it is.
Walked away. And the civilian, the black brother with braids, was so frustrated and angry because had he not gone to that extent, they would have had him in the car, locked up, and took him down to the precinct. So they started walking off, and the black brother was so frustrated. He said, oh, so where y'all going now? Why y'all walking away? You was just about to arrest me. Why are you walking away? But because he had the sensory and the acuity to go that far, think about that. The police officer was dead set on arresting him, wasn't letting him go, said that he fit the description. That was his reason for arresting that civilian. Once they got the picture of the person that they said he fit the description, once the civilian and the officer looked at the picture and it was confirmed that the guy did not fit the description, they had no other choice but to let the guy go. In part also because it was being filmed and the officer had no legal right to detain the civilian because he did not fit the description. So these are the tangibles that I'm giving you as you interface with law enforcement officers. Know your Constitution. Know your rights. If you can spit and speak and articulate your rights, you paralyze the officer. Step one, the officers. That's step one. Step two, if the officers are not their supervisor, you have a legal right to ask for the officers to call their supervisor to the scene. You have a legal right to do it, which they have to abide by. That's step two.
Yep.
Step three, if the officer is a supervisor and they claim that you fit a description, you have a legal right to ask, well, let me see the picture of that description that you claim I so-called filled. They have to show you the picture in your face, and watching that picture, you can validate that that's not you. They have no other legal rights to detain you. They have to let you go. Steps 1, steps 2, and steps 3. Those are your tangible steps, your action steps as it relates to law enforcement, and your right as a civilian. Those are my tangibles and action steps, Cal. You have anything to add to that?
Thorough, not thorough, man. Not too much thorough, family. Like, I mean, that's the type of work I did back in the day in Chicago, talking to folks on the street, because we can't be afraid of our own people, man. That's one thing. We can't be afraid of our own neighborhoods and our own people, especially if we're coming with tangible advice and information to help keep them alive and help them to flourish. We can't be scared of that. Now, when if you're coming on some nonsense and you're trying to scam the folks, then you have cause for concern because somebody's going to find out and it's not going to be pretty. But if you're coming to really benefit the people and give them something that they can use tangibly to help them to survive and their families to flourish, then by all means, you know what I'm saying? It still may be a struggle, but it's not going to be something where you feel like, oh, like I'm going to be a target. No, you know, you're going to be an asset and they're going to see that eventually, right? Now, even if it's not right away, they will eventually see, because if you continue to do it. So I posted, and we posted some links on the chart on the chat here at the bottom, like the Know Your Rights as a protester, know your rights when police officers approach you, because as Kaidi said, it's very important. You have to know that, because in order to empower yourself and not get caught up out there, as they say, caught up, you know, you got to know your rights. You got to know where you stand, what your true power is as a citizen. Because if you don't, they'll just rally you. They just corral you and say, okay, like you say, you fit the description. Okay, jump in the squad car. You know, where you been? Where you going? Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, I don't have to answer that. Now, I will say this, you know, and I've talked to other law enforcement, you know, those folks who are in law enforcement have some bit of humanity still in them and don't have that white racist mentality, because those cops and police officers that were with, was it Chauvin? The guy Chauvin, that put the neck on, George Floyd, you know, they were complicit. They have that white they have gotten brainwashed into that white mentality, because if they were any bit of officers with humanity, they're like, okay, man, let's ease up. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, we already got them constrained, ease up. And then again, we talked about in the news how they probably knew each other. They worked at the same nightclub, so there's no way that they didn't know of each other, right? Somehow, some way, you know, they worked there at one time. They even if he made like you look familiar, like something. So that's another layer to the story that has yet to develop, that will come in time. But yeah, family, everything Kaidi just said, go back, rewind it. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real, because it's legitimate info that you can use. And again, use the links that we put up here. Look into those, because those are valid as well. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, and again, this ain't about fear. This isn't about fear. You know, you shouldn't fear them, right? You should respect, because they should respect you. There's no fear here.
Right.
You know, fill your life with faith. You know what I'm saying? Fill your life with hope, not fear. You know what I'm saying? It's not about fear. It's about recognizing who you have in front of you and saying, here are my rights.
Yeah. Baby, yeah. You know, say very born this. You know I have patience.